Hello and welcome to week 12. For week 12, when we look at week 12 at a glance, we have a few things in our review section. We've got one assignment due this week at the end of the week. Let's look at the review section. We'll go through these documents in just a minute, but you've got your project number 3 with a diagram of putting it all together. By putting it all together, I mean that you're going to combine project number 2 with your primary research to create project number 3. We'll do an outline. It's actually a reverse outline, and I'll show you that in just a minute. You've got your project number 3 criteria, which more or less reinforces, it's just kind of a a written document that outlines the same process as you see in the visual putting it together diagram. And then you've got a sample project number 3. All right, so when we look at the diagram for putting it together, all this semester with your scholarly research, you've been reading, for the most part, IMRAD style papers. That means there's an introduction with a literature review, methodology, the results, and a discussion conclusion. The discussion and conclusion go together. They're typically two separate paragraphs, or two separate sections depending on the length of your paper, and then you have a references part. So you've got your why, how, what, and so what. That means that you're kind of extending that conversation about your topic because you're adding your own primary research to that. So you're going to take project number 2, you're going to add on primary research part 1 and part 2. And in the process, you're going to probably need to move some paragraphs, especially your conclusion, and then you're going to have a references page. Now, to check the order of this, what you're going to do is once you've pasted everything together, so the step 1 is to take that primary research analysis, parts 1 and 2, and paste it into the final copy of project number 2, just above the conclusion. And then you're going to read through it and decide what might need to be moved. For example, the counter argument or the conclusion, because the conclusion is going to be at the end of project 2. Now you've got all this primary research. So you're going to need to take that conclusion and move it down. And then you might need to add something to these paragraphs as you've moved them or readjusted them. That's another decision you're going to have to make as you turn that draft in or prepare to turn that draft in. So once you've put this all in order, double checked your own, paragraphs to make sure that things like the intro still fit the whole project, things like the conclusion are in the right spot and fit the whole project, thinking about where your counterargument goes, if you need any transitional paragraphs. Then once you've got that all together, you're going to open up a separate Word document and say there's 15 paragraphs in this new combined copy, this new combined project with project number 2 in the primary research. What I want you to do is number that sheet with those 14, 15 paragraphs, whatever it is, and next to each number, just a brief main idea of what's going on in that paragraph, just the main idea. So that can be in sentence form or clause form like you see in the example below. And then I want you to read through for a logical flow from introduction to conclusion. This is your self-check on the order of this combined paper. So you want to then, look through that, decide if you need to move anything, because that's not only going to change the outline order, but also your paper order. And then you're going to submit only the outline to Moodle. So if you look at this, if you see paragraphs 1 through 6, each one is the main idea of that particular essay, that particular project, where it's arguing for kind of the concept of, is there a way to rehabilitate in the prison system. And then once you get to 7 through 14 will be very much the same for all of you, because you'll explain who your participants are, the instrumentation. It'll explain when the survey was opened and for how long. It will analyze the data, then explain those results and what they proved, explain the limitations, etc. So really, leading up to that primary research, you'll need to think about what your main ideas are. The last part of it, 7 through the conclusion, should be, like I said, similar for all of you, and that follows an order of that IMRAD style paper. What you're really checking for is your prior to that primary research, what's working and what might need to be adjusted in order to enhance the flow of your paper, as a whole. All right, this is just like I said, a written version you've got access to. Again, you look at the concept of your project number 2. As it had that literature review and conclusion. And then you've got your primary research analysis, which is your own research methods and results. And then you're going to form project number 3 by putting these together. But in this box, I encourage you to look at things like expanding your introduction and making sure that your thesis fits this whole project. Use the body of project 2 to express the views of the experts and other authoritative sources. And then comes your research, that primary research analysis, where you've given the methodology and the actual analysis of that data. And then think about where that counter argument fits best. Does it fit before your primary research? Would it be better after the primary research? Obviously, you need probably to expand your conclusion. You'll want to think about that seriation and headings that we talked about before. Many of you added that to your project number 2 as I encouraged you to do. But you're definitely going to have headings with your primary research. So how are you going to move from headings in your literature review into those required headings for the primary research? And like I said, you do have an example of a project. So you can go through the whole thing, you can see how it was laid out, and you can see how the headings really are a big guide for your reader, because they cue them to the sections and help them keep that your argument organized in their minds. All right, so you just have one thing to do this week. Like I said, part 2 of your primary research. Again, this includes your data collection. I'm sorry, not your data analysis, your results, your limitations, and your discussion. But I want the whole thing, parts 1 and 2, come in together with the appendix. All right, so I can see the flow of the whole thing, and I can double check that it's in good order before you add it to your project number 2. As always, if you have any questions as you're moving through this process, don't hesitate to ask. And I hope you have a wonderful week.